I share custody of my 5-year-old daughter with my ex-wife, but last fall, she decided to sue me for child support, despite the fact that we had agreed to split our parenting responsibilities evenly. This entire situation turned into a spectacle, with her and her lawyer embarrassing themselves in front of the judge, but I'll get to that later. For some context, my ex-wife and I were married for several years. We never had the kind of relationship where we argued all the time, but there were plenty of disagreements, mostly involving strong emotions and differing opinions. However, we always managed to negotiate our way through things and find common ground. That's why I was taken completely by surprise when she told me she wanted a divorce about 2.5 years ago. I hadn't seen it coming at all. I took it hard at first. I spent a couple of days in tears, grieving the end of our marriage, and then I decided to go fishing to clear my head. After that, I knew I had to start planning how to manage the practicalities of our separation. Neither of us had a great financial situation at the time. Our combined income wasn't enough to maintain both the car and the house. So we agreed that I would handle selling the car and she would contact a realtor to start selling the house. But in the end, I had to do both because she didn't follow through on her part. Our financial situation was grim, to say the least. We had more debt than we had assets, and she tried to leave all the debt to me while she walked away with a clean slate. I wasn't about to let that happen. I made sure that everything we owned, as well as all our debts, were split evenly between us. That included making sure our daughter would spend equal time with both of us because I firmly believed she had the right to have both her parents in her life. We promised each other we would remain civil and respectful for the sake of our daughter, but that promise didn't last long. We also agreed that neither of us would pay child support since our incomes were more or less the same. She did, however, agree to take care of buying most of our daughter's clothes and other essentials, as she was receiving around €100 a month in child benefits from the Finnish government. For a while, everything seemed to be settled, but then things started to shift. After the breakup, she began ordering new furniture even before she had found a new place to live. It was clear to me that she couldn't afford it, but she went ahead and made the purchases anyway. 2 weeks later, she moved out of our home, and a week after that, I found out from our daughter that my ex-wife had already started seeing someone new. I didn't really care, but I did raise my eyebrows at how quickly she had moved on. Things went downhill fast with her work. She began calling in sick often with flimsy reasons that didn't seem legitimate. When her boss tried to address the issue and give her feedback, instead of improving, she simply quit her job. Not long after, she applied to a school, but within 2 months, she had dropped out of that as well. Then she started demanding child support from me, despite the fact that she had caused her own income collapse. We brought in a professional to weigh in on the situation, and it was determined that I didn't owe her any child support. It was clear her financial problems were of her own making. However, in a gesture of goodwill, I offered to pay for our daughter's insurance, hoping this would resolve the issue and keep things peaceful between us. But just a few months after our divorce was finalized, she got pregnant with her new partner. This seemed to give her a new sense of confidence, and suddenly she started demanding money from me all over again. She married her new man, and these developments seemed to embolden her. Even though she had a new family forming, she couldn't stop fixating on my financial situation. She seemed envious of the fact that, despite us earning roughly the same amount, I was able to manage my finances well enough to enjoy small luxuries like eating out occasionally while she struggled. Her latest demand for child support came last fall. By this point, she had found a new job, but I could tell that she was using our daughter as an excuse to ask for money when, in reality, it was more about her frustration with her own finances. I told her that if she had legitimate needs when it came to our daughter, I would be happy to contribute. However, I insisted that we calculate all expenses properly so that we could figure out exactly what was necessary. Rather than agreeing to this reasonable proposal, she demanded that I pay her a flat €200 a month without any real explanation for where that number came from. When we finally appeared in court, I sat back and watched as she and her lawyer tried to make their case. It quickly became clear to everyone in the room, including the judge, that their arguments were flimsy at best. They had no real evidence to support the need for child support, and the whole thing turned into an embarrassing spectacle for them. In the end, the judge saw through the charade, and I walked out of that courtroom without owing her a dime. It was a relief but also a reminder of just how far she was willing to go to try to manipulate the situation to her advantage. My ex-wife's demands regarding our daughter's expenses were completely unfounded. There wasn't any real reason behind them other than her desire for control. Throughout our relationship, and even after, she had always been the kind of person who needed to have the last word in everything. This time was no different, except her behavior escalated further. She insisted I pay for certain things related to our daughter, and when I questioned her about the validity of these demands, she threatened to sue me if I didn't comply. I didn't take her seriously at first and even laughed off the threat, but things took a different turn when I received a message from her lawyer signaling that she was indeed going to follow through on her threat. That was when I realized I needed to take this seriously. I immediately messaged her, making it clear that from that moment onward, I would only discuss the matter through our lawyers. I didn't want to engage with her directly anymore, especially as things were escalating in such a toxic way. I started looking for a lawyer to represent me, bracing myself for what was to come. Over the following months, it became obvious that her case had no real foundation. When the court papers finally arrived, I noticed glaring inconsistencies. Her claims were based on inaccurate and, in some cases, completely false information. It seemed that she and her lawyer hadn't bothered to request any of my financial records before taking the matter to court. Instead, they made wild assumptions about my income, estimating it to be much higher than it actually was. Not only that, but they also grossly underestimated my living expenses. They had created a narrative based on assumptions that was bound to collapse under scrutiny. Recognizing how weak her case was, I reached out to her one last time and asked if she was sure she didn't want to settle the matter outside of court. Predictably, she refused, standing firm on her demands. At this point, I decided to proceed with what some might call malicious compliance. I didn't offer to settle again and let the legal process unfold. Our lawyers conducted a thorough investigation into both our finances, my income, her income, and all our expenses. It quickly became clear that my ex-wife had more than enough money to support our daughter without needing any additional contributions from me. In fact, the irony of the situation was undeniable. After accounting for necessary expenses like housing, medical costs, and daily living, it turned out that she had more disposable income than I did. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of her entire case. But things didn't stop there. As the legal process continued, she made a desperate move in an attempt to salvage her case. She tried admitting false evidence to the court. Her lies, however, were so blatant that my lawyer and I immediately caught them, and it wasn't long before the judge took notice as well. A few days later, my lawyer received a call from her lawyer, who had finally realized the truth, that my ex-wife had lied and that the case was built on false information. He suggested we settle, and I thought the matter was coming to an end. But to my surprise, just when we were about to finalize the settlement, her lawyer informed us that, for some inexplicable reason, she had decided not to settle after all. When we finally went to court, the judge was visibly frustrated by the whole situation. He asked her lawyer to state their demands. Instead of giving a straightforward answer, her lawyer started to provide a backstory, but the judge immediately cut him off, telling him to skip the details and get to the point. After an uncomfortable pause, her lawyer admitted that they had no demands. The judge was clearly irritated and confused, asking, "Then why are we here?" My lawyer calmly responded with something along the lines of, "That's what we'd like to know." The judge, at this point, had enough. He asked my ex-wife's lawyer if they had tried to settle, and the lawyer admitted that my ex had refused to agree to any settlement. Frustrated, the judge ordered both parties to step out of the courtroom and return within 20 minutes with a settlement agreement. Since it was clear my ex had more financial resources, we negotiated that she would cover the majority of our daughter's extracurricular activities, insurance costs, and any other related expenses. We also reached an agreement that she would compensate for the financial disparity between us. Once the judge approved the agreement, my lawyer and I left the courtroom feeling victorious. My ex-wife, on the other hand, left in a mix of anger and embarrassment. In the weeks that followed, she continued trying to control the situation. She demanded changes to our custody schedule, specifically wanting to alter how often our daughter switched between our homes. I declined, reminding her that we already had a legal agreement in place and I wasn't interested in revisiting the issue. When she threatened to sue me again, I simply reminded her of how that had turned out for her the last time. Her frustration was palpable, but I left it at that. A week ago, I received another unexpected message from her. She informed me that she and her current husband had a massive fight, which escalated to the point where the police were called. She admitted that she had attacked him, and now she was planning to file for divorce. Child Protective Services had also been involved, as our daughter and her other child were present during the altercation. Her life had clearly taken a turn for the worse. She was now facing her second divorce with 2 children from 2 different fathers, all before turning 30. She had mounting debts, increasing expenses, and it now looked like our daughter would be spending the majority of her time living with me, which is what she had been wanting for the past couple of years anyway. In the end, my ex-wife's attempts to manipulate the situation for financial gain backfired spectacularly. Not only did she fail in her lawsuit, but she also ended up with more responsibility for our daughter's expenses than she originally had. Meanwhile, her personal life fell apart, and now I'm left to care for our daughter just as I always wanted.